Well, welcome to Dan Reacts, my channel where I react to anything and everything from the rock music world, past and present. What we're doing tonight, we've got some Y&T for you. Now, this is a band that I was into back in their heyday, back in the late 80s, early 90s. In fact, saw them live on the Dr. Feelgood tour. It was a big break for them at the time, opening on that tour. Loved them, but forgot about them, forgot how much I loved them until last fall. So for the last 6-7 months, been in a major rabbit hole listening to everything from Y&T. And so tonight, I'm going to rank all of their studio albums, all 10 of their original studio albums ranked for you from worst to first. Coming up next on Dan Reacts. If you would please, before we get started, hit that subscribe button. Trying to build this channel. We'll be more consistent about content moving forward, at least one show per week. And if you like what you see, hit that thumbs up. But subscribing is the best way that you can help me build this channel and support me. I am a full-time independent content creator. This is a new channel. Really excited about it. Passionate about music. Hopefully it'll grow. Hopefully you can help me get there and be along for the ride. All right, let's start at number 10. And this one was pretty easy for those of you who might be Y&T fans. It's they went through a couple phases. First of all, I am not including their first two records that they made under the name Yesterday and Today. And there's a reason for that. I just feel like it was a different band. It wasn't just a different name. It was a different band. They were almost playing in a different genre of music. You go back and listen to those first two records, which I like. And there's a lot of stuff that kind of remained in their set lists over the years and even to this day. But it was different. It was very blues and soul based. Think Journey before Steve Perry joined. They had those three records where it was a lot of instrumental work and Greg Raleigh singing lead vocals at times. It was as if the band changed when Steve Perry joined them. Well, this was the same lineup, but they really did change when they signed to A&M and did their first record, Earthshaker. They dialed in what they wanted to do, who they were musically. Dave kind of found his voice and his playing style. Those first two records are different, so I kind of set them off in a different bucket to be enjoyed in a different way. They're not going to be part of this list today. But Y&T went through some phases. And around 1990-91, they were really disenchanted with the music business. And they left Geffen Records, or they were bounced off the label at the time. They just weren't getting any promotional support. And they essentially put out these couple of albums independently. Dave Meniketti, the lead singer, guitar player, built a studio in his home, and they recorded and produced everything there themselves. And this was the first record of two that they did during that period in the early to mid 90s. And you can tell it's a different approach for them because it's a whole different sound. It's almost sounds experimental. It was released on May 21st, 1995. There were no singles off of this record, but there are some highlights. But the highlights are few and far between. Like I'm Lost. I really enjoyed that song, although it's a remake from one of those first Yesterday and Today records. That kind of sums up what this album is about. Is the best song on it is a remake from 30, 40 years earlier. But there's some stuff on here that just doesn't sound like Y&T. The song Fly Away, you won't even recognize as them. Quicksand is very interesting, kind of a grungy sound. And it was in that period when grunge had started to take over and he'd kicked all the hair bands out of arenas and into clubs. And it's just bizarre. And near the end, kind of the last minute or so, there's sort of this refrain where Dave Meniketti is almost like speaking in tongues. It's some sort of gibberish, or it sounds like backwards. They played the recording backwards. Very, very strange. There's just not a lot of memorable songs, not a lot of songs to hang on to from this one. It's not one that really gets into your soul and makes you want to revisit it and replay it. So that's why it's at number 10. Now, number 9 was the other album from that period, Endangered Species, released on October 8th, 1997. Again, no singles from this one, but this sounded like they kind of knocked the rust off. They got some of that experimental stuff out of their system. There's some better material on this album. And actually, there's a few songs here that I take away that I still like to go back and listen to and really enjoy. The opener, Hello, Hello, kind of lets you know right away, heavy groove, aggressive vocals from Dave. Right off the bat, you're like, okay, this is going to be different than Musically Incorrect. This is a better record. And really, the best stuff on this record is the slower stuff. This was also during a period of time where Dave was doing some solo records, did a blues record, and then did another record that was more classic rock. And it had 4 or 5 ballads on it that are phenomenal. If you ever listen to the Meniketti record, if you haven't, can't recommend it highly enough. But the better songs on this are kind of the mid-tempo to slower songs, the ballads. God Only Knows is an outstanding slower song. Sail On By and Still Falling, kind of a mid-tempo rocker, Still Falling, but really, really catchy. This album is absolutely worth a listen, and I quite enjoy it. I want to show you something here. I'm going to share the screen. This is what I did in, I want to say it was October when I rediscovered Y&T. So I built a playlist with all 10 of their studio albums as Y&T. And so you can see here just, there's Musically Incorrect, and here's Endangered Species. And we'll kind of go through this a little bit and talk about some of the deeper cuts as well. Number 8 is the last studio album that they ever produced, Face Melter. And this one, I think some people might refer to it as a comeback album. Because this really was, if you consider Musically Incorrect and Endangered Species a little bit experimental, Face Melter was kind of a return to their roots. Released on May 21st, 2010, there actually was a single and a video called Coming Home. And right off the bat, when you hear that song, you realize, okay, this is Y&T. Outstanding guitar riff, really memorable, catchy chorus. The lineup at this time, too, was really, really great. Leonard Hayes and Joey Alves had long since been out of the band. In fact, by the time Face Melter came out, they might have passed away. I think it was shortly after Face Melter came out. And the lineup was just so tight. I think musically it was the best lineup that they've ever had. Some really, really great songs as well on this record. Go back over here to the screen share and Shine On, terrific song. I told you about I'm Coming Home. If You Want Me is a lot of fun and sounds like kind of classic Y&T. Blind Patriots, very, very catchy. Gonna Go Blind is a little different. It's a little different, kind of experimental, but it catches you, and it'll get stuck in your head, especially the chorus. Losing My Mind, which is a bonus track, I think is terrific. But If You Want Me has worked its way into being really one of my favorite core ballads that Y&T's ever done. So love Face Melter, even though it was done 20 years after the album 10, which is my number 7 album on this list, incidentally. But 20 years between 10, which was their last record they did on Geffen, and Face Melter, and yet Face Melter feels and sounds like Y&T. 10 is an interesting album for me. There's a lot of good songs on here, but things had kind of started to take a turn at Geffen. They were kind of seeing the writing on the wall. They only got one single off this record, Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. It was the first release. It's a heavy power ballad. It's very good. It might be the best video they ever produced. This was not a great video band. They were not comfortable on camera. They looked awkward and weird, and that might explain some of the reason that they didn't really get the traction, didn't become as big as I think they deserved to have gotten back in the day, just based on their catalog and their material alone. But 10 was the end of the road for them. And they were so disenchanted after the way they got dropped by Geffen that a year later, 1991, they did a live record called Yesterday and Today Live, where it was done in the Bay Area, where is their home. And it was supposed to be their farewell concert. They just wanted to give up Y&T because they were so annoyed and irritated by the direction of the music business, especially as it relates to hard rock. And so they released that first single, and then they absolutely stopped all promotion, pulled all money, pulled them off the road, which is unfortunate because there's a bunch of really good songs on this album. She's Gone is terrific. Let's go back here again and get you to 10. Just right off the bat, like Hard Times actually was a staple in their set list for many years, and they still play it to this day. Lucy is a whole lot of fun. There's that Don't Be Afraid of the Dark was that first single. Girl Crazy's fun. Come In From the Rain, another really passionate ballad that I love. She's Gone. It's a really good album. The reason it's 7, on the strength of the songs alone, it might rank higher, but the production value, for whatever reason, even though the album we're going to talk about here in a couple of minutes, their first album, the first of 2 on Geffen Records, was terrific production value. But this one, even in this playlist where everything's equalized the same through Spotify, it sounds as if it's recorded at a lower volume, like a lower gain. And I have to turn it up, which just takes away some of the edge from it, some of the energy that I want from this record. But just based on the quality of the songs itself, it ranks over those other 3 records, even though I just don't like the production value of it. I got Black Tiger at 6, and I know this is low for some of you. Some people hold Black Tiger in a very high regard. In fact, I think Eddie Trunk in their documentary said he thinks it's one of the great rock records of that entire era. I don't necessarily agree, obviously, because I have it here at 6, but it does have some of their biggest, most well-known songs, and again, concert set list staples. Even the opening refrain, the little musical interlude that comes into it, is something they used to introduce themselves on stage for many years. And then Open Fire was a terrific opener, one of the 3 or 4 openers that they used their entire career, still to this day. Just a really perfect album and concert opener. Don't Want to Lose got some airplay. It was a single. It's a little different for them, a little more sing-songy with a lot of harmonies in the chorus, but really cool. Hell or High Water was a concert staple. Forever, to me, one of their best songs they've ever done, and that's one of the highlights of this record. And then I'm a big fan of some of the deep cuts, and I know some Y&T fans don't really enjoy Barroom Boogie. I do. Absolutely love it. I think it's fun, especially the live version. We'll talk about the live albums at the end here just as a little bonus. But it's a lot of fun. Barroom Boogie, love My Way or the Highway, catchy as hell. Winds of Change, great ballad. It's a really good record. And the fact that it's at 6 says more about their entire catalog and how I feel about it than it does about this particular record. Indeed. All right, let's go to number 5. And this is Mean Streak. Again, I'd say their first 3 records, Earthshaker, Mean Streak, and Black Tiger, in some form or fashion, if you go look for other rankings, most people have one of those 3 records at number 1. I think I just have different tastes and think about things differently. But Mean Streak, to me, released in September of 1983, had the one single Mean Streak, and this was the first album that really started to get them significant airplay, where they started to get on 120, 150 radio stations across the country. Actually charted on the US Billboard 200 at 103. And Mean Streak alone, if I'm going to introduce someone to the band, I'm probably playing Mean Streak for them as the first song. I think it kind of sums up everything that you love about Y&T, just the incredible opening riff that just grabs you by the throat. Meniketti's vocals are just energetic and in your face and really forward in the mix. And then it's got one of the better guitar solos. In fact, I did a video recently, you can see it here on the channel, of my favorite 10 guitar solos, and this is one of them. Just really, really love it. Shows off Meniketti's playing and singing. But there's a lot of other stuff on this record, too, that I like. Midnight in Tokyo is a big fan favorite. Hang 'em High, Down and Dirty. there's a lot of cool stuff on this record, and it's very, very deserving of a top 5 placement, I think, in their catalog. Number 4 is Contagious, and this was the first of 2 records that they did on A&M. And what's fascinating to me about this one is if you go watch their documentary, and if you're into Y&T, or maybe this show piques your interest about them, you can find it on Prime Video. It's worth renting. It's about $3, and really well done, full documentary. Eddie Trunk narrates it. A lot of other rock stars from that era talk about Y&T. It's got interviews with the band and some live stuff. It's really, really well done. And they talk about how when they first joined Geffen Records, John Kalodner, who's I'd known of him, obviously, over decades of his success of some of the great bands that he's managed and produced. Didn't realize what a weirdo he is. It's one of the interesting highlights of that documentary is watching the little clips of him and the sound bites. But his whole thing was that he wanted to take the band in a more commercial direction. And Contagious was released in June of 1987. So right at the height of hair band popularity, when Bon Jovi was ruling the world and Def Leppard and Motley Crue. And about 4 years later is when grunge would come on. So this is the apex of that movement. And you can really see it. I even remember being aware when this album came out that this was happening. And you could tell by the back cover, the picture that they took of these guys. It's like, okay, they're trying to sort of shove them into this hole, and define them in a way that matches up with the big guns in that genre. And in fact, there's a quote in the documentary from John Kalodner where he says, "I wanted them to sound like fucking Bon Jovi." That's kind of how he talks. And they do. The title track, Contagious, great song, but it steals a lot of elements from Bon Jovi songs. The big gang vocals and the big catchy hooks. There's even the guitar riff once it gets past the intro sounds a little bit like You Give Love a Bad Name. Dun, 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 dun. It's very, very similar. You'll see when you listen to it if you haven't already. But it's great too. And this entire album is great. There's just tons and tons of songs on this record. LA Rocks is a lot of fun. There's some really energetic tempos on this song. Temptation is sort of a mid-tempo, kind of passionate, almost a rock ballad. Kid Goes Crazy is a lot of fun. They would do that live and really stretch out and ad-lib a little bit and do some extended solos and things like that. Armed and Dangerous has the big, starts with the a cappella chorus, which was a very big tool to use in the 80s. Rhythm or Not's fun. Bodily Harm, I think, is one of the most underrated songs of their catalog. And then Eyes of a Stranger is simply one of my favorite Y&T songs of all time. And then there's even it finishes off with I'll Cry For You, which is a purely guitar instrumental. And over the years, they kept it in their set list, and he would use it to lead into another song that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But really great record. And as I mentioned earlier, in stark contrast to the next record and the last record they would do on Geffen Records, the 10 record, outstanding production quality on this one. Really nailed it. Sounds live, which is what I look for in a studio recording. On to number 3, and this is where I realize that I set myself apart from a lot of the really diehard Y&T fan base, because the album Down for the Count is not this high on most fans' lists. It was the last record that they did on A&M, and they tried to do the same thing that Geffen would then try to do 2 years later. This is released November 4th, 1985, is they wanted it to get more commercial. They wanted more MTV attention. They wanted more airplay. They wanted hits. In fact, Summertime Girls is on this record. That was their biggest hit. It's probably the one more than any other Y&T song, even if you're just a casual fan. But Summertime Girls was actually first released on a live album they did before this called Open Fire. And they put the studio version on that record along with the live version, which is better, actually. Doesn't have keyboards in it. He changes it up after the guitar solo. Instead of going straight into another chorus, he goes back to an earlier verse. It's very, very cool. It's definitely worth checking out. But it's much more pop oriented. It's got some serious pop sensibilities in this one. Singles, All American Boy, the only song that they ever recorded on any of these 10 records that they didn't have anything to do with the writing process. It was completely written by outside writers, and yet it got a video and it was released as a single. Face Like an Angel was another single. Charted at number 91 in the US, which was their second most popular record. Upbeat, it's got a lot of hooks on it. One of my favorite Y&T songs, track 3 on this album, Anytime at All. Check it out. It's so much fun, especially this time of year. The leaves start to turn on the trees. The blossoms start to come out. It's sunny and warm again. You roll your window down in your car. You play that song, and it gets you jazzed up, man. That is just a great, great song. The opener, In the Name of Rock, I really like. I think it's one of the more underrated album openers in their catalog. And then they have a lot of fun, too. Anything for Money is a fun tongue-in-cheek song. Don't Tell Me What to Wear is a blast. And then it finishes up with Hands of Time, which is kind of almost a progressive, sort of a moody feel. There's some keyboards involved there. Really, really fun record. And I know a lot of Y&T fans don't love it because it's not as rock, but it's a big favorite of mine, obviously by its placement on this list. At number 2, I've got Earthshaker, and I know that most Y&T fans consider this to be their best album. And it does have some of their most iconic songs on it, the 2 ballads especially, Rescue Me and I Believe in You. And I know I said if I was going to play a song for somebody to introduce them to Y&T, I would play Mean Streak for them. But honestly, if you're watching this and you aren't that familiar with Y&T, and maybe you're not as into the fast-paced hard rock stuff, because Y&T showed they had so much range. They could do the really sappy, great monster ballads, like they called them back then in the 80s. But they also had some songs, and Mean Streak's one of them, that bordered on metal, especially some of the riffs and how hard charging some of their intros were. But man, the ballads were fantastic. And I Believe in You would be the song that if you don't think you're into the metal part of it, go check that song out. Again, one of the great guitar solos. There's actually 2. It's a longer song, really emotional singing performance from Dave Meniketti, and some of his best guitar work ever. You talk about making the guitar sing and taking the melody and elevating it and letting it soar. Really terrific. Dirty Girl's a great song. Shake It Loose is a lot of fun. There's even a song on here, Squeeze, which became a staple of their concert set list, which was sang actually by their bass player, Phil Kennemore, which is a lot of fun. Hurricane was a concert staple and an opener at times. Let Me Go is fun. Knock You Out. It's a really, really strong album, released on June 30th, 1981. And then that brings us to number 1. And this, again, sound like a broken record. I know I stand out on this one, or I differ from the crowd. I don't think many diehard Y&T fans would place this as their number 1 album, but I do. And I think it kind of just shows where my sensibilities were with the genre back then. Like, I liked a little bit of everything. I liked the hard stuff, but I liked the ballads, and I also wanted it to be memorable and hooky and have some pop sensibilities. One of the highlights of this album is the opening track, Rock and Roll is Gonna Save the World. They brought in an outside songwriter, Jeff Lieb, on this album. He contributed. He didn't write any of these songs fully himself. At first, the band was hesitant, but Dave Meniketti said on the record later, worked out really well, kind of got us out of a rut, songwriting-wise, took us to a new place. I think this was some of their best work. He really appreciated the contributions from Lieb, and later said in the documentary, it's a great album. Love that album. But Rock and Roll is Gonna Save the World. Listen to it now. This song came out in 1984, and you would think that it's written in 2026, given the current political climate, some of the lyrics there. But it's also builds into this this big call and answer sing-song chorus at the end where it sounds like they're in a concert and the crowd is singing back to them. It's very, very catchy, very effective. And the production value of this album, I mentioned it earlier, I like when albums sound like they performed it live. This is as good as you can produce a rock album. Absolutely tight. All the levels are perfect. You can turn it up in your car and it sounds phenomenal. You can hear all the instruments. Dave sounds great. And the guitar playing's amazing. For this one, let's go through the song list here on Spotify. Life, 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 great song. Masters and Slave, great song. I Keep on Believing, kind of almost a ballad, but a little bit of a faster tempo. Lipstick and Leather, I think, is one of their most underrated songs. There is a live video you can find on YouTube of a performance they did in San Francisco. And if you've seen it, you'll remember it. And if you haven't seen it, you go watch it, you'll remember it, because one of the things that stands out is Dave is wearing a pink leather jumpsuit, jacket, pants. It's kind of ridiculous, but it also looks great. And when they start doing Lipstick and Leather, the whole crowd starts jumping up and down. It's got a really driving groove, and it's just so much fun. It's kind of Dave almost chants the verses sings them. It's a lot of fun. Don't Stop Running might be their best song ever. I said Forever was one of my favorites. Don't Stop Running is right up there. Did get a release as a single. This album went to number 45. It's their highest charting album of all time, widely cited at approaching 500,000 copies. So this album could still go gold at some point, and hopefully it will for those guys at some point. But it's their best-selling album. Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy is fun. It's not the old Sammy Hagar song. She's a Liar, This Time, ballad. Go for the, and here's what makes this album great and might have put it over the top for me, is Go for the Throat is a bonus track. And it's one of my favorite tunes they've ever did. A lot of times bonus tracks are throwaways, right? They'll tack it onto the Japanese release, or they'll throw it on for an exclusive Walmart or a Target release these days or whatever. And so they just kind of hold back one of their better songs nowadays. But it used to be that a bonus track was like, it wasn't good enough to make the record. This is not that. And in fact, Go for the Throat is featured. It's the second song on the live album that I mentioned earlier, Open Fire. And it's fantastic. Another one that's call and answer to the crowd. Go for the throat, baby. It's really catchy, really terrific. All right, now I said I'd talk about their live records, a little bit of a bonus. They have two. This was the first one that I mentioned that came out right before Down for the Count. So this record came out in about 1984, and this is the one that Summertime Girls originally showed up on. Love the production quality of this album. It's a great mix. The vocals come through really clearly. Sometimes on the live records from that era, the crowd kind of drowns out the singer a little bit too much for my liking. But the highlight of this album for me, first of all, it's the only one where you're going to find a live version of Go for the Throat, which I just talked about. It's fantastic. And it's my favorite version of I Believe in You. So if you're going to go check that out, I would actually direct you to this record and tell you to listen to the live version on Open Fire of I Believe in You, because that song evolved from the version that we saw in Earthshaker, the first studio album. There, during the very slow verses, there's just a repeated guitar pattern all the way through. But as time went on, Dave started to ad-lib more and more on his Les Paul with little runs and phrases in between his singing lines. It was one of the songs that really sucked me into them originally when I first discovered them back in the 80s, because I was just blown away by how good of a singer this guy was and how much I loved his voice, but also what a phenomenal guitar player he was. Literally one of the best players of that entire era, and he doesn't get credit for that. I think because he also sang and was the front man. Sometimes those guys don't get taken as seriously as guitar players, but they also, usually front men that sing don't play lead. They play rhythm, and it's phenomenal. And this is the epitome and really the apex of where he arrived to with this song, and sort of played it in this style from then on out. They're still touring today. He's in his 70s. He still sounds phenomenal. He hasn't lost much of his upper end of his register, but he still plays it like it is on this record. And so I would recommend that. And then also the live version of Summertime Girls is a real highlight because it takes the keyboards away, turns it into more of a rock song. And if you thought it was too cheesy before, and a lot of Y&T fans kind of rejected it because they thought, oh, they went pop, they sold out. Well, listen to the live version on Open Fire. But this was the record that introduced me to the band and really got me into them. You know, saw them on MTV, whatever, liked them. Started listening to this. I think it's the best set list of all their live albums. Starts with Mean Streak, Hurricane, Don't Stop Running, Struck Down, Winds of Change, Black Tiger, Midnight in Tokyo, Beautiful Dreamer, Hard Times, I'll Cry, I Believe in You, Squeeze, Forever, Earthshaker, Rescue Me. It is the best collection of songs that they have on a live record. And you can kind of feel the energy once you realize that this was thought to be their farewell performance at the time it was done. You can hear it in some of his verbiage, you know, between songs and some of the rap between tunes. At one point he goes, "This is it, guys." And they kind of go back and play some older songs too. So, you know, I've given you a couple of songs that I would introduce you to Y&T with, but if there was one record that I could put in front of you or ask you to listen to fully understand and sort of capsulize their catalog, it would be this one. So absolutely, I would check that out. Well, what do you think? What did I get wrong? What did I get right? What do you like the best about my list? And what did you just hate about it? Let me have it. I appreciate you being here. Again, if you would hit that subscribe button, really trying to build this channel. This is a lot of fun for me. Most of my content is NFL related. I cover the Seattle Seahawks on a full-time basis. But music is just as big a passion for me. And so we're going to be here. We're going to do a lot of these. We'll pick a band and rank their albums. We'll take a band and I'll do like my favorite 15 songs of theirs. We'll review new releases. As I'm trying to build this channel, I will be staying away from reaction videos. You'll see a couple of those on my channel. You can go back and watch. But it's just such an uphill battle these days with the record companies and the copyright claims. And I know there's some big channels out there doing it, but they're so big that they also get promotional and sponsorship money. And so I'd like to grow this channel. I'd like to get it to the point that it's monetized. That would be cool. If not, it's fine. I'm doing this kind of for me, but I would love to have as many of you along for the ride as possible, get some engagement. Let's have some conversations, some debates in the comments. But if you would subscribe, please, it's free. All it costs you is a mouse click and help me grow this channel. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time on Dan Reacts.